The night was silent, yet inside his heart there was a storm he refused to face. He stood in the center of his grand home, marble shining beneath the soft light, his voice steady but cold as ice, telling her to walk away. She looked at him with eyes filled with questions, eyes that once believed he could be more than this mask of pride he wore. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of betrayal she never thought would come from the man she trusted. He thought he was protecting himself, keeping his life free from complications. But in truth, he was throwing away the only soul who had ever seen beyond his armor. She did not cry, not in front of him. Instead, she turned, each step echoing like a final goodbye, and he stood still, convincing himself he would never miss her, never long for what he had just lost. Yet the silence she left behind pressed heavy on his chest, a silence that grew louder as hours turned into days. He told himself his success would fill the emptiness, that power would replace the warmth she carried. But deep within him a small, stubborn ache began to rise. She, meanwhile, stepped into the cold night with nothing but her resolve, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. She carried not only her broken heart, but also a fragile hope she refused to let die. What he thought was an ending was only the beginning of a story that would haunt him, for he never imagined the day would come when she would stand beyond his reach, untouchable, and his heart would finally understand the true cost of pride. The first nights alone were the hardest. The world outside her window was wide and cruel, yet she pressed on with a quiet strength even she had not known lived inside her. She worked hours that blurred into one another, carrying trays in crowded cafes, scrubbing floors until her hands ached, and returning each night to a small apartment that held nothing but the faint warmth of her courage. Hunger gnawed at her more often than she admitted, but she saved every coin, whispering promises in the dark that one day things would change. When her body grew heavier with the child inside her, people stared, some with pity, some with judgment. But she refused to bow her head. Instead, she held it higher, daring the world to try to break what it could not see, the fire within her. Every sacrifice became her silent vow, that the life growing inside her would never feel abandoned, never feel unwanted. On the nights when fear crept in, she placed her hands over her stomach and spoke softly, telling her child stories of love, hope, and a brighter tomorrow. Her laughter was gone, replaced by determination. Her softness hardened into resilience. She became her own anchor in a sea of storms. And though loneliness wrapped around her like a shadow, she did not let it swallow her. Each dawn she rose again, tired but unbroken, and with every step she took, she shaped herself into someone stronger. Someone the man who had cast her aside would never recognize. What began as loss was slowly turning into the foundation of a new strength, and though she didn't know it yet, the world was watching the rise of a woman who would one day be untouchable. When the child was born, the world seemed to pause. Her tiny cry filled the small hospital room, fragile yet fierce. And in that sound, the mother felt both her pain and her purpose transform into something unshakable. She named her daughter with trembling lips, holding her close as though the warmth of her arms could shield them both from the cold world outside. Every sleepless night that followed became a battle, but also a victory. She worked long days, then returned home to rock her baby to sleep, her voice soft with lullabies that carried more love than any riches could buy. The apartment was small, the walls thin, and the food scarce. Yet inside those walls she created a haven of laughter, tenderness, and hope. She sewed little dresses from scraps of fabric, stretched every meal so her child never went hungry. And when exhaustion threatened to break her, a single smile from her daughter restored her strength. As the girl grew, so did the bond between them. Stronger than steel, the mother turned every hardship into a lesson, teaching her child that love was wealth, kindness was strength, and resilience was their legacy. Neighbors often wondered how she carried so much on her shoulders and still managed to stand tall. They did not see the tears she wiped away in silence, or the prayers whispered before sleep. What they saw was a woman who seemed unshaken, guiding her daughter with steady hands and an open heart. What once felt like an ending was becoming a story of beginnings. For the little girl was not only her daughter, but also her reminder that life, no matter how broken, could still bloom into something beautiful. She did not know it yet, but every step forward was shaping her into the woman he would one day find untouchable. He had everything men claim to want. His name filled newspapers. His face appeared on magazine covers. His business empire stretched across cities, and every deal he touched seemed to turn into gold. Yet behind the polished glass walls of his office and the endless applause of boardrooms, there was only silence waiting for him at the end of the day. Success had made him powerful, but it had also made him hollow. He would sit at long tables surrounded by people who respected his position, but not his heart. And when the lights dimmed and the crowd left, he found himself staring at empty chairs, remembering the softness of laughter he once took for granted. Nights in his grand home felt more like confinement than comfort. Every painting, every chandelier, every marble stair was a reminder of the life he had built at the cost of the one person who had truly seen him. He told himself it was better this way. That control was safer than vulnerability. Yet sometimes in the quiet moments, when the world was asleep, her face would come back to him. Not with anger, but with the gentleness he had pushed away. He wondered where she was, what became of her. And though pride tried to silence the questions, regret began to speak louder. The more victories he gained, the more they felt like ashes in his hands. For the man who once believed he could never miss her, the ache of her absence was now the only truth he could not escape. And he feared the day he might see her again, only to realize she had become untouchable. Years slipped away like pages torn from a book, and fate, in its quiet way, arranged a meeting neither of them expected. It happened on an ordinary day. Yet for him it felt like the world stopped moving. He saw her across the crowd, not the fragile woman who once stood in his mansion with tears in her eyes, but someone transformed. She carried herself with grace, her smile soft yet unshaken, and beside her walked a young girl whose laughter lit the air like sunlight. His chest tightened. Every step she took closer felt like a mirror showing him what he had lost. She no longer looked at him with longing, but with calm strength, a kind of peace that made her seem beyond his reach. He wanted to speak, to call her name, to undo the years that lay heavy between them. But his voice betrayed him, caught in the storm of regret. She met his gaze for a brief moment, not with anger, but with a quiet recognition, as if he were a chapter from a book she had long closed. The girl at her side tugged her hand, and she leaned down with a tenderness that made his heart ache. He realized then that she had built a life without him, one filled with love and laughter that he had denied himself. Crowds moved around them. Yet for him there was only her, and the truth he could not escape. The woman he had once cast aside was no longer waiting for him. She had become radiant, strong and untouchable, and in that instant, he understood the true weight of his choices. He had power, wealth, and influence, But none of it could buy back the moment he had thrown away. He stood only a few steps away, yet it felt like an ocean stretched between them. His lips parted with words he had rehearsed in countless sleepless nights, but the courage to speak them faded when he saw the strength in her eyes. She no longer carried the weight of needing his approval. She had built her own world, one where her laughter was genuine, and her daughter's hand in hers was proof of a life filled with love. He tried to reach her, offering a smile that trembled with the hope of forgiveness. But time had carved its own distance. She did not turn away, nor did she look with bitterness. Instead, she gave him something more powerful, a kindness that carried no demand, no expectation, only truth. In that quiet exchange, he felt the finality of what he had lost. For years he had told himself there would be another chance, another moment to make things right, but here it was, and it slipped through his fingers like sand. She had forgiven him, yet forgiveness was not the same as return. Her heart was no longer his to claim, and that reality struck harder than any punishment he could have imagined. He watched her walk away, her daughter laughing beside her, and the sound lingered long after they disappeared into the crowd. The empire he had built suddenly felt small, the walls of his mansion colder than ever. He had believed he would never miss her, had believed he was untouchable, but now he knew the truth. She was the one who had become untouchable, and his greatest success could never heal the wound of letting her go.